There are places the US technically owns, but doesn't want to talk about. They show up on government lists, but not on your GPS. And somehow, they still have zip codes, airspace, and federal protection, despite having no laws, no taxes, and no population. Welcome to the corners of America they filed under too weird to mention. You won't find them in textbooks. Most Americans couldn't point to them on a map, but the government? Oh, they're very aware. Because in a world where every square inch is monitored, taxed, and surveilled, these territories slipped between the cracks and stayed there on purpose. Today, we're diving into 10 US territories so strange, so strategically forgotten, they almost feel off limits. From uninhabited islands with defense contracts to zones where federal law kinda, sorta, maybe applies, this is where freedom gets weird. Wait till you hear about the place where you're a US citizen but can't vote, can't own land, and technically don't have full constitutional rights. Think you know America? Let's see what happens when we look at the parts they quietly left out. Like this video if you've ever wondered what happens when a country ghost writes its own borders. Subscribe if you're into legal loopholes, freedom hacks, or just really hate paperwork. Let's crack open the map and expose the places America tried to erase. Number 10. Navassa Island. There's a US territory so forgotten that the census doesn't count it, Google barely maps it, and the only residents are lizards, birds, and whatever's left of a 19th century guano empire. Navassa Island is the geopolitical equivalent of a missing sock. Technically yours, but no one knows where it came from or why it still exists. The US grabbed it in 1857 under the Guano Islands Act. Yes, an actual law that let America claim land for bird poop. It sits between Haiti and Jamaica, closer to both of them than the country that owns it. You can't visit, you can't move there, and the Coast Guard only drops by like a landlord checking whether you still live in the apartment they forgot you had. And yet, here's the twist, Navassa is an unincorporated US territory with protected wildlife status, federal oversight, and enough historical baggage to fill a cargo ship. Expectations? A tropical paradise? A secret island hideout? A tax-free libertarian utopia? Sure, as long as your definition of paradise includes no fresh water, no infrastructure, and cliffs sharp enough to slice through your good intentions. Here's where it gets interesting. Whenever you ask, so who actually controls Navassa Island? The government gives this beautifully vague answer. The United States maintains sovereignty. Translation, we own it, we don't use it, but don't touch it. Real world data points. Population, 0. Crime rate, technically perfect, statistically suspicious. Cost of living, undefined. Bring snacks. Rent, free, but you'll be fighting frigate birds for the best views. Job market, unless you're a lighthouse ghost, unemployment is 100%. But then, surprisingly, scientists love this place. Endemic species, coral reefs untouched by human stupidity, a coastline so rugged it looks like the island is actively rejecting civilization. What nobody tells you is, Haiti still claims it. The US still refuses to discuss that claim. And the whole island is basically a legal shrug floating in international waters. Living here? Impossible. Owning land here? Illegal. Moving off grid here? You'd last one afternoon, maybe two if you brought sunscreen and a durable ego. But the emotional consequence is this. Navassa exposes a flaw in the American map. Territories we keep not for people, or for culture, or for development, but because letting go signals something governments hate, admitting they forgot why they took it in the first place. Honestly, Navassa is the most relatable US territory. It's tired, it's done with everyone, and it just wants to be left alone. Same, buddy. Look, Navassa is wild. The terrain is so jagged it looks like the Earth started rendering a volcano and then rage quit halfway through. The cliffs are vertical. The heat is biblical. The shoreline is basically a weapon. And that old abandoned lighthouse? Perfect setting for a horror movie called Who Approved This? Every photo screams, don't even think about stepping here without liability insurance. Picture this. You step onto Navassa at sunrise. No traffic, no taxes, no Wi-Fi. Just wind, salt, and the unsettling awareness that if you twist your ankle, your emergency contact is the ocean. It's beautiful, it's peaceful, it's also aggressively uninhabitable. And if you think this island is weird, wait until you see the US territory that technically exists, but only at low tide. Number 9. Kingman Reef. There's a place the US legally owns that's smaller than a parking lot, disappears at high tide, and has 0 residents, 0 infrastructure, and 0 laws. Welcome to Kingman Reef, the most commitment-phobic US territory in existence. It's technically an atoll, but even that feels generous. It's part of the US Minor Outlying Islands, which is government code for "we still claim this, but don't ask us why." There are no buildings, no roads, no population, not even any land that sticks around for the whole day. When the tide comes in, Kingman Reef basically taps out. And yet it has federal protection, is managed by the US Fish and Wildlife Service, and technically falls under the jurisdiction of the Department of the Interior. So yes, you can be arrested on a reef that's underwater most of the time. Which raises the obvious question, arrested by who? The seagulls? Let's talk numbers. Sort of. Population, 0. Crime rate, technically 0 unless you count interspecies crab fights. Housing market, bring your own flotation device. Job market, only job opening is don't drown. Cost of living, free until your boat engine dies. Then it costs everything. There's a treaty from the 1930s stating Kingman Reef is part of the US. It's been used for vague, strategic purposes, which is a fun phrase that often means we'd rather you not ask questions. Military vessels occasionally stop here. Scientists drop in to tag turtles. And one time, a billionaire tried to make it into a libertarian ocean nation. Spoiler, it didn't work. What nobody tells you is, this place is part of something bigger. A ring of seemingly pointless Pacific claims that, when connected, form a defensive chessboard across the ocean. It's not about who lives there, it's about who gets to fly over it. You want to live off the grid. Kingman Reef is so off-grid, it doesn't even qualify as land most of the day. But here's the twist. It's protected, surveilled, and legally defended, even though it has no one to defend. Because in geopolitics, presence isn't what matters. Ownership is. Owning a sandbar might sound silly until you realize it gives you control of the airspace, the sea lanes, and just enough leverage to matter in a diplomatic pissing contest. It's America's most passive-aggressive territory. It's not even trying, and it still outranks Guam in terms of legal weirdness. Let me get this straight. We have real cities begging for infrastructure, but Kingman Reef has federal oversight and marine biologists on standby. The entire territory is about the size of a Walmart parking lot, if the Walmart was melting. Also, the only reason it even stays visible is coral. Literally a pile of wet rocks is getting more respect than most zip codes. Someone explain that to Flint. Picture waking up to gentle waves inside your tent because the land vanished overnight. There's no one around, no planes, no buildings, just you, your soggy shoes, and the existential realization that your GPS says you're in the United States while your feet say you're in the ocean. Romantic? Maybe. Sustainable? Absolutely not. Be honest. If you had to live on a reef for a week, would you bring a tent, a satellite phone, or just lie to your family and disappear? Drop your plan in the comments. I won't judge. I'm already halfway to bringing a hammock and questionable life choices. Number 8. Swains Island. There's a US island with its own seat in government, and no actual residents. It's owned by a single family. It has a zip code. And no, you still can't move there. Swains Island is the weird cousin of American Samoa. Technically a US territory, practically a private estate, emotionally, somewhere between Robinson Crusoe and a Season 1 Lost set piece. The US formally annexed it in 1925, but here's the kicker. One family, the Jennings family, has claimed ownership since the 1850s, and the US government just rolled with it. The island is represented in the American Samoan legislature despite having no full-time residents since 2008. Yes, there's a delegate for a place with 0 population. Democracy, baby. For a while, Swains was home to a small copra plantation and a handful of families, but extreme storms, climate change, and general island burnout sent everyone packing. Today, it's protected, closed to the public, privately managed, and still part of the United States. You want to disappear? Swains Island heard you, but politely declines your presence. No one lives there. No one's allowed to move there, but it still gets federal recognition, has a recognized boundary, and hilariously, shows up in official voting districts. Real-world data dump. Population, 0. Permanent, less than 10. Temporary maintenance visits. Crime rate, 0, unless coconuts get violent. Cost of living, immeasurable. No stores, no commerce, no economy. Housing market, closed. Fully booked by birds and ghost stories. Job market, not unless you count island caretaker as a side hustle. A completely uninhabited island gets a legislative seat, but DC still can't vote for president. Love that for us. Swains Island is like the US government's secret favorite child. It does nothing, says nothing, costs nothing, and still gets invited to all the formal events. Meanwhile, actual cities are screaming for infrastructure like, hey, can we get a working post office? And Swains just chills, doing absolutely nothing, and thriving. Imagine owning a territory so exclusive the ocean has to RSVP. Picture this, you wake up on Swains, no Wi-Fi, no traffic, the only noise? Palm trees creaking in the wind and seabirds arguing about fish. You walk to the edge of the lagoon, barefoot, untouched by capitalism. It's beautiful, peaceful, and then you remember, you're trespassing on someone's private island, who might also be watching this video. Hold up, Swains has a government rep, but no people. Meanwhile, my cousin got kicked out of his HOA for not trimming his hedges. Make it make sense. Oh, and remember Kingman Reef? At least that place didn't pretend to have a congressman. Number 7. The Northern Mariana Islands. There was a time when you could walk into a shop in Saipan, see a Made in USA label, and know that the shirt was probably sewn in a sweatshop by someone working 14-hour days without US labor protection. Welcome to the Northern Mariana Islands, America's loophole with palm trees. The Northern Mariana Islands, yes, plural, are a chain of 14 islands in the Pacific, part of a commonwealth in political limbo. They're US citizens, sort of. They're part of the US, kind of, but for decades, they operated under a unique legal arrangement that basically said, we follow American rules, unless they're inconvenient for business. Real-world data points. Population, approximately 47,000, mostly on Saipan. Unemployment rate, 10%, significantly higher than the mainland. Minimum wage, finally aligned with the federal rate, $7.25, only after years of delays. Cost of living, high, most goods are imported. Rent, approximately $700 to $1,200 per month for a one-bedroom, depending on island and condition. Crime rate, relatively low, but human trafficking cases in the 2000s drew national attention. Reddit quote from a local, living here is like being American, but off-brand. From the mid-1980s through the early 2000s, Saipan became an international scandal wrapped in denim. Clothing companies took advantage of US origin labeling laws while skipping US labor standards. The result? Workers, mostly women from China and the Philippines, were brought in, underpaid, overworked, and housed in overcrowded barracks. And the kicker? Everything was still stamped Made in USA. Haha, yes, the American dream, made possible by the legal equivalent of terms and conditions apply. Post-scandal, the islands have worked to clean things up. The federal minimum wage finally caught up. The garment factories shut down. New rules rolled in. But economically, the islands have struggled since losing that industry. Today, the tourism industry is the main lifeline, mostly visitors from Korea, China, and Japan. There are casinos, but the Gaming Commission makes Vegas look like the Vatican. There's this quiet paradox. It's a beautiful place, culturally rich, slow-paced, incredibly kind people. But it also exposes the underbelly of what happens when a nation allows exceptions to its own values for profit. The US said, hey, we're gonna treat you like family. Just don't expect to sit at the big table. Imagine being American but having to ask Congress for permission to enforce labor rights. And when the scandal hit, the mainland pretended like they'd never heard of the place. Classic ghosting. But you know, geopolitical. It's wild. You can feel safer walking around Saipan at 2 a.m. than you do in parts of Chicago at noon. But in one place, you can vote for who runs the country. In the other, you just hope Congress remembers you exist. Quick reminder, the Mariana Trench is named after these islands. So yeah, even the deepest part of the earth gets better PR. Unlike Swains Island, the Northern Mariana Islands actually have people. They're just too polite to riot about the legal weirdness. And if you think this place blurred the line between business and government, wait until you see the next territory, where the only constant is surveillance and silence. It gets stranger. Buckle up. Number 6. Palmyra Atoll. There's a US territory with no government, no population, no taxes, no laws. And yet it's fully incorporated into the United States. Let me say that again. It's officially part of America, but also officially unorganized. How? Welcome to Palmyra Atoll, where federal logic goes to snorkel. Palmyra is a coral atoll in the middle of the Pacific, halfway between Hawaii and American Samoa. It's the only U.S. territory that's both incorporated, i.e. part of the United States proper, and unorganized, i.e. 100% unincorporated, has no local government, no legislature, and no permanent residents. Basically, it's like if Delaware existed on paper, but the only thing there was a mosquito preserve and a rusty runway. Real-world data points. Population, 0 permanent residents. Crime rate, 0, unless ghost stories count. Cost of living, infinity. You can't live there. Rent, not for lease, protected land. Quality of life, depends on how you feel about jellyfish and isolation. The land is co-managed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Nature Conservancy. That means no one can move there, settle there, or open a tiki bar, no matter how good your piña colada recipe is. And yet, Palmyra is technically more US than Puerto Rico. Think about that. So let me get this straight. I can't live there, vote there, or visit without a permit, but if someone commits a crime, they'd be tried under US federal law? This place is the DMV of islands. Fully official, completely dysfunctional, and somehow still underfunded. Here's the kicker. People have tried. During World War II, the US Navy set up a base on the atoll. Later, private owners dreamt of turning it into a luxury retreat. Then came conservationists, biologists, and a few too many accidental deaths that made even the hardiest researchers rethink their career paths. Seriously, Google the Seawind murder case, then maybe don't. Palmyra is what happens when the US government says, yeah, we'll keep it, but never decides why. It's been a wartime base, a bird refuge, and allegedly a murder scene, but never a home. And yet, it's still more legally American than Guam, where people actually live and pay taxes. Somewhere, a founding father is spinning like a fan blade. Picture waking up to crystal clear water, no cars, no cities, just the sound of waves and frigate birds. You're surrounded by untouched coral reefs, old military ruins, and an overwhelming sense that you should not be here. You feel free until you realize the nearest hospital is 1,000 miles away and your phone says, no service, ever. You know a place is cursed when every attempt to develop it ends in bankruptcy, bad weather, or a Dateline special. Honestly, Palmyra might be the Bermuda Triangle's sarcastic little brother. Number 5. Baker Island. There's a US territory so empty, the only permanent resident is the sun. Welcome to Baker Island, 1,700 miles southwest of Hawaii, 100% federal property, and 0% chill. Baker Island is another member of the "Wait, we own that?" club, a scorched coral chunk in the Pacific, claimed by the US in 1857 under the Guano Islands Act. Yes, we took it for bird poop. That's not a metaphor, that's legislation. Since then, not much. A few failed settlements, some World War II airstrip ruins, and a whole lot of heat. Quick stats. Population, 0. Crime rate, 0%, unless you count trespassing birds. Cost of living, 0. No one's allowed to live here. Rent? Job market. Only viable role is sun-baked researcher with regrets. It's a national wildlife refuge now, which means no civilians, no development, no sunscreen strong enough to save you. So let me get this straight. We built an airstrip, abandoned it, left some rusty debris, and now call it a protected ecosystem? That's not conservation. That's cleanup we gave a title. In theory, Baker Island is the definition of freedom. No laws, no rent, no traffic. But in practice, it's freedom with a UV index of 13 and no shade. Sure, it's tax-free, but also oxygen optional. There's no infrastructure, no phone signal, and the nearest hospital is hope. Even the wildlife avoids eye contact, like, what are you doing here, man? Spending a day on Baker Island is like losing a bet with a survivalist. You get sandblasted, sun-scorched, and existentially roasted all before lunch. There's no water, no Wi-Fi, and the only shade is your own doubt. On the bright side though, your chance of being mugged is 0, mostly because there's no one around to mug you. Baker Island has a perfect crime rate and no citizens. Meanwhile, Chicago has 2.7 million people and a crime dashboard that updates hourly. Makes you wonder, do we measure safety by peace or presence? Alright, let's settle this. Would you spend a week on Baker Island for $10,000? No shade, no phone, just you and the sun. Drop a yes or no in the comments and let me know if you're brave or just deeply in debt. Number 4. Wake Island. Some places get forgotten by time. Wake Island? Time remembered it. and then left it in 1943. Wake Island isn't just remote. It's military limbo remote. About halfway between Hawaii and Guam, this US territory is 1 part Coral Atoll, 2 parts World War II museum, and 12 parts restricted access. It's not a state, not a commonwealth, not even a proper territory with permanent residents. It's a US-administered possession. Translation? It exists because the military says so. Population, 0 permanent. Approximately 100 rotating military and contractor personnel. Crime rate, 0, if you don't count war ghosts. Housing, government facilities only. Cost of living, irrelevant. You don't choose Wake, Wake chooses you. Weather, 90 degrees and humid year-round. Great for rust. Once a pivotal base in the Pacific, Wake Island was bombed the same day as Pearl Harbor. Today, it's mostly a runway, some bunkers, rusting communications towers, and a radar installation that definitely doesn't not watch satellites go by. Reddit quote from a guy who deployed there once. Imagine living in a microwave with sand in your socks and no one to talk to. Now add 3 hurricanes and a ghost. You know it's bad when even the US Census is like, nah, we're good. Want freedom? You'll get it. No rent, no taxes, no traffic, just you, a heat index of 110, and enough barbed wire to make your vacation feel like a minimum security ghost prison. Wake Island is technically American soil, but it has no constitutionally guaranteed rights, no local government, no elected officials, and no legal way to permanently live there unless you're military or married to a weather balloon. It's the kind of place where the sun rises before the news catches up, where time zones bend, radios hiss, and you wonder if your paycheck is worth the mild psychological unraveling. Let me get this straight. You land on an island with no bars, no civilians, and a population smaller than a McDonald's shift team, and the first thing you see is a no trespassing US property sign. Who's trespassing? The birds? The ghosts? There's nowhere to go. You're surrounded by water, fencing, and metaphors about imperialism. Picture this: the roar of C-130 engines, rust creaking in the trade winds. You step onto the cracked airstrip, feel the heat grip your throat, and stare at endless sky meeting salt water. No traffic, no emails, just quiet. Too quiet. You're free. You're isolated. You're sweating through government-issued socks. And that radar tower? Yeah, don't ask what it's watching. It's like being trapped inside a Cold War history book someone left out in the rain, delivered deadpan because it probably was. Wake Island, no crime, no taxes, no citizens. Baltimore, all of the above, but also restaurants. Life's about trade-offs. And if you think this place was locked in the past, wait until you see the US territory that literally glows in the dark. For reasons nobody brags about, you're not ready. Let's keep going. Number 3, Johnston Atoll. There's a US territory that's part toxic waste dump, part crab sanctuary, and 100% off limits, unless you're a bird, a biologist, or a bunker buster. Welcome to Johnston Atoll, where the sunsets are beautiful and the soil might glow a little. Johnston Atoll is an isolated coral island smack in the middle of the Pacific. No local government, no residents, and, if you're unlucky, a little leftover sarin gas. From the 60s through the early 2000s, Johnston was the US military's favorite place to store, incinerate, and sometimes accidentally detonate chemical weapons. Like a science fair project no one wants to claim, it housed everything from Agent Orange to nuclear test debris. Now it's a protected wildlife refuge, because when life gives you nerve agents, you give it nesting seabirds. Population, 0, except for a crab army. Crime rate, 0, unless you count ecological war crimes. Rent, 0. Bring a tent and a will. Cost of living, technically nothing. Emotionally, everything. Job market, closed, unless you're a hermit crab with clearance. The only place where low taxes comes with a side of don't dig too deep. So let's say you could live here. You've got complete freedom. No bills, no neighbors, no government, but you also have no water, no Wi-Fi, a runway decaying in the sun, and maybe a half-life if you trip over the wrong rock. There are still signs warning about unexploded munitions. The land has been declared decontaminated, but only kind of. The The US finished burning its chemical stockpile in the early 2000s, but no one's lining up to move in. Because here's the twist. Freedom is great, but freedom on a toxic island with weapon-grade history and aggressive land crabs? That's a very specific flavor of liberty. Okay, but seriously, imagine a government facility where we stored VX gas, dropped nuclear waste, ran secret tests, and then said, let's give it to the crabs and call it a nature reserve. Johnston Atoll is America's version of putting a tarp over a haunted couch and pretending it's storage. It's not gone, we're just not talking about it anymore. Picture this. You're standing at sunset, silence, ocean breeze, an abandoned runway stretching toward nothing. You take a deep breath and pause. Is that freedom? Or is it just low-level radiation and the sound of coconut crabs dragging military debris back to their cave layers? Either way, vibes. In Miami, you pay $4,000 for a 2-bedroom and worry about gentrification. In Johnston, you pay nothing and worry about mustard gas leaks from 1983. Trade-offs. Number 2, Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico isn't just a Caribbean island with good beaches and better rum. It's a full-blown constitutional paradox. A place where 3.2 million US citizens live without voting rights in Congress. And yes, it's still technically a territory, but let's not kid ourselves. It walks like a colony, talks like a colony, and Washington treats it like one. Puerto Rico has no voting power in presidential elections. Federal laws apply, but representation? That's optional apparently. Taxation without representation. Ring any bells? And while technically under US jurisdiction, Puerto Rico gets ghosted every time a hurricane hits or the power grid blinks, which is often. Let's talk numbers. Unemployment? Approximately 5.9%, 2024 average. Median income? Approximately $22,000 per year, less than half the US mainland. Electricity stability? Laughs and blackouts. Crime rate? High in metro zones, especially San Juan, though improving. Tourism industry? Up 78% since 2021, mostly digital nomads chasing tax breaks. Puerto Rico's Act 60 lures in wealthy Americans with ultra-low taxes, 0% capital gains, 4% corporate. Translation? If you're rich, you're golden. If you're local, you get priced out of your own damn island. Imagine living in the US, but the US won't admit it's your landlord, keeps charging rent, and leaves you without a fuse box. This is what freedom looks like under a magnifying glass. A slow economy, a broken grid, and a weird kind of invisibility cloak. One where you're close enough to mainland benefits to taste them, but still held at arm's length. And yet, Puerto Rico has a heartbeat. Artists, activists, crypto expats, and locals refusing to leave their roots. It's vibrant, tense, bold, a place where you can live free, but the cost is clarity, because no one can answer, what exactly is Puerto Rico to America? A state? A nation? A bargaining chip? Let me get this straight. You're a US citizen. You carry a blue passport. You get drafted. You pay federal taxes. But when Congress votes on laws that affect you, you're mute. Unless you're a hedge fund bro who moved here to dodge taxes, then suddenly the red carpet rolls out. Puerto Rico is the only place where you can be both completely American and entirely ignored. Hey, remember Johnston Atoll? At least the crabs didn't vote either, so there's that. Fun fact, Puerto Rico has had 5 non-binding referendums on statehood. Washington's response? Crickets with a side of bureaucracy. Number 1. The Freely Associated States. Let's talk about the Freely Associated States, because nothing says freedom quite like having a compact agreement with your geopolitical sugar daddy. We're talking Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and Palau. 3 tropical nations with beaches that look like a Windows XP wallpaper, and defense agreements that sound like a prenup written by the Pentagon. They're independent, sort of. They govern themselves, technically. And yet, the US controls defense, currency, mail service, and, oh yeah, gets to build military bases basically whenever it wants. Freedom? Depends on which side of the treaty you're reading. Here's where it gets fun. Population of all 3 combined? Just over 200,000. Cost of living? Varies wildly. $3 for local fish, $9 for a bottle of shampoo. Crime rate? Super low, unless you count corruption and nepotism, which is more of a vibe. Job market? Most young people leave for Guam, Hawaii, or the US mainland. Healthcare? Hope you like flights. Military access? The US gets full security rights in exchange for cash aid and vibes? You know it's a weird setup when a country's national motto might as well be, "We're independent, but only on Sundays and alternate leap years." Okay, I love palm trees. I love slow life. But if I have to choose between beach sunsets and Amazon Prime shipping, I'm gonna be conflicted. Want groceries? Hope the boat made it this month. Want medicine? Better have cousins in Hawaii. Want consistent electricity? Roll the dice. Oh, and try explaining to a tourist that this sovereign state still uses US zip codes. Freedom isn't free. Sometimes it comes with coconuts and confusing paperwork. Imagine waking up on an island where the sky burns orange at sunset, the air smells like breadfruit and salt water, and your neighbor works at a US radar base you're not technically supposed to know exists. It's paradise, until you need a dentist or try to ship something from Amazon. Puerto Rico thought they had identity issues. Try being a country that needs permission to sneeze near a naval runway. More people from these islands now live in the US than in their home countries. Translation? America gets the land, and the talent too. It's peaceful here, but peaceful like a house you don't own, and the landlord shows up with a jet every 6 months. You're on a porch, mango juice in hand, ocean breeze swaying your hammock. It's quiet, gentle, free, until a military plane roars overhead and your cousin says, "That's the new drone delivery test. Don't ask." Yeah, it's peaceful, but with a Pentagon playlist in the background. Like the video if you learned something weird. Subscribe if you've ever considered going off-grid but still want access to Netflix.